Good morning, everyone. Today is April 26th, and it is the third Sunday in Easter. And I'm going to change it up a little bit today and do our Liturgy of the Word from our chapel. It's one of my favorite places here at St. Pius on our campus, and if you've not ever visited the chapel before, I really encourage you to do so next time you come back to church. I'm going to do the readings today from the Ambo, and then after our lesson, I have a little bit of something special for you all. We're just going to take a few minutes and spend a few minutes with Jesus. He's in the tabernacle right behind me, and I have a really special song to play for you, and we'll finish up that way today. So today's gospel is actually from the Gospel of Luke, which is a little bit different than you'll normally hear during Year A, which is the cycle we're on right now with our readings. So most of the Year A readings from the Gospel are from John's Gospel. So today we get a little bit of a different version of the road to Emmaus from Luke. And we learn about Jesus and how he meets a couple of his other disciples who don't recognize him again either, until he breaks bread with them. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and do our readings today from the Ambo in the chapel. So hopefully that is a little bit more like church, at least for you all. And you can see behind me here our beautiful altar that we have in the chapel at St. Pius. If you've not ever visited the chapel, I really encourage you to do so next time you are at church. It's really wonderful, and there's a lot of really beautiful windows in here, and it's one of my favorite places. Today's gospel that you're going to hear is actually from the Gospel of Luke, which is a little bit different than most gospel readings you'll hear during the A cycle, which is the cycle that we're on right now with our readings for the different liturgies. So you might notice that that's a bit different than it's been the past couple weeks. But we'll go ahead and get started. The first reading is a reading from the Acts of the Apostles. On the day of Pentecost, Peter stood with the 11 apostles and spoke in a loud and clear voice to the crowd. Friends and everyone else living in Jerusalem, listen carefully to what I have to say. Now listen to what I have to say about Jesus from Nazareth. God proved that he sent Jesus to you by having him work miracles, wonders, and signs. All of you know this. God had already planned and decided that Jesus would be handed over to you. So you took him and had evil men put him to death on a cross. But God set him free from death and raised him to life. Death could not hold him in its power. The word of the Lord. Today's gospel reading is a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Two of Jesus' disciples were going to the village of Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they were talking and thinking about what had happened, Jesus came near and started walking along beside them, but they did not know who he was. Jesus asked them, "What were you talking about as you were walking along?" The two of them stood there looking sad and gloomy. Then the one named Cleopas asked Jesus, "Are you the only person from Jerusalem who didn't know what was happening there the last few days?" "What do you mean?" Jesus asked. They answered, "Those things that happened to Jesus from Nazareth. By what he did and said, he showed that he was a powerful prophet who pleased God and all the people. Then the chief priests and our leaders had him arrested and sentenced to die on a cross. We hoped that he would be the one to set Israel free. But it has already been 3 days since all this happened. Some women in our group surprised us. They had gone to the tomb early in the morning but did not find the body of Jesus. They came back saying that they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. Some men from our group went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see Jesus either. Then Jesus asked the 2 disciples, "Why can't you understand? How can you be so slow to believe all that the prophets said? Didn't you know that the Messiah would have to suffer before he was given his glory?" Jesus then explained everything written about himself in the scriptures, beginning with the law of Moses and the books of the prophets. When the 2 of them came near the village where they were going, Jesus seemed to be going further. They begged him, "Stay with us. It's already late and the sun is going down." So Jesus went into the house to stay with them. After Jesus sat down to eat, he took some bread. He blessed it and broke it. Then he gave it to them. At once they knew who he was, but he disappeared. They said to each other, "When he talked with us along the road and explained the scriptures to us, didn't it warm our hearts?" So they got right up and returned to Jerusalem. The 2 disciples found the 11 apostles and the others gathered together, and they learned from the group that the Lord was really alive and had appeared to Peter. Then the disciples from Emmaus told what happened on the road and how they knew he was the Lord when he broke the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. So in today's gospel reading, we learn about these 2 disciples who ran into Jesus as they're walking along the road, and they don't recognize him. This is kind of a theme that we've been hearing the past few weeks. First with Mary Magdalene, and then with doubting Thomas last week, and now this week with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Jesus tries to walk with them and talk with them, and he tells them scripture and starts to recount, what the prophets have said, and they still have no idea who they're talking to. They're upset by what's been going on, and they just don't really see. So he takes, his time, and he's trying to explain to them, and then they see that he has more of a journey to go on, and so they invite him in. And when he breaks bread with them, and when they share that meal together, and he says the words, suddenly their eyes are open and they recognize who they're talking to, and then he disappears. And what do after that? They go back to Jerusalem, and then they tell everyone what's happened. They tell everyone about their experience with Jesus. And so in this story, what I think is really, really cool and special about this story is that it gives us a model for what we have as our Mass. Jesus taking the Old Testament scriptures and talking to the disciples about it is like our liturgy of the word at Mass. And Jesus breaking bread with them and sharing that communion is like our liturgy of the Eucharist. And then at the end of every Mass, we are sent to share the good news of Christ with others. So just like these disciples go back to Jerusalem and share their story about meeting Jesus, that's what we're asked to do too. So we're kind of seeing in this story a very, very early model of today's Mass. And I think that that's really important that we know that. Another thing that is really important that we talk about is just kind of this idea of doubt. We learned, like I said, about doubting Thomas last week, and we talked about it a little bit, but with, these different people not recognizing him, it's easy to have doubts about things, and they found their way back to Jesus just like we're asked to when we have doubts. And doubts are just a part of human nature. Everybody has doubts at some point, and we all question things, and that's a really healthy part of being a human being. But our doubts are what lead us to seek out those bigger questions and answers in our faith, and ultimately can help us be better Christians and better followers of Jesus. I think when you have doubts, or if you have questions, or you don't quite understand something, it's really important, whether it's a child going to their parents, or even maybe a teenager finding a friend that they trust, that they think is a really faithful person, or an adult mentor, or youth minister, someone like that. We all have people in our lives that can kind of help us work through those things. And I think that that's so important. And one of the things that's most important right now during this time that we're all going through is that we understand our families as also being what's called the domestic church. And we've talked about this before, but maybe taking today's readings and seeing how the disciples shared a meal with Jesus and kind of incorporating that into our own families and our own households, whether it's, just spouses eating together, or children and families, or whoever you might be having a meal with. Even if you're just by yourself, it's so important that you thank God and that you spend the 30 seconds that it might take to say a prayer of thanksgiving for that meal before you, and do that together. So that's a really easy way to start incorporating prayer into your life and to your family's lives without, any super major changes. And once you do that, you'll see it kind of take hold in other areas. We say grace before every meal at our table, and I also really try as much as possible when I remember to say grace, even if I'm out at a restaurant, which isn't very often anymore. I used to kind of feel a little bit silly about doing it because I felt like people were watching me, but that's kind of the idea. The idea is that you are being a witness for others in your love of Christ and your thanksgiving. So try to incorporate that, and maybe make that meal time a time to kind of support one another as well. So something you can try is maybe talking with each other about what the best and the worst and the funniest parts of your day were. That's a really great way to help each other be thankful for things, help support one another through what we're struggling with, and also just kind of share time together in a really meaningful way. So I hope that you got something out of today's readings. We're going to finish up today just taking a few minutes to spend with Jesus, and I'm going to play a really nice song for you, and I hope that you all like it, and I will see you all next week to do our next lesson.
You who come to me shall not hunger, and who believe in me shall not thirst. No one can come to me unless the Father beckons, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up on the last day. The bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. And if you eat of this bread, you shall live forever. You shall live forever, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up on the last day. I am the resurrection. I am the life. If you believe in me, even though you die, you shall live forever, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up on the last day. are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up on the last day, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you